Imagine you're standing on the edge of a field you've spent 20 years building. You've done everything right, followed the recipes, bought the best seeds, and managed the margins. But this season, the math has fundamentally broken. You look at the invoice for your nitrogen and diesel, and the numbers are 200% higher than they were 18 months ago. Your first instinct is to survive, and survival in this business usually means one thing. You cut. You decide to skip that last pass of fertilizer. You think, maybe I can save 20% on inputs and just take a 20% hit on the harvest. But here is the terrifying reality that modern agronomy doesn't want to tell you. Agriculture is not a linear game. When you cut 20% of a critical nutrient like nitrogen, your yield doesn't just dip, it falls off a cliff. We're talking about a 40 to 60% collapse in your total output. That is the biological cliff, and it is the single greatest threat to the mid-sized farmer today. This isn't just bad luck. It's a structural trap designed by history. For decades, the Green Revolution promised us that we could grow our way out of any problem using cheap, fossil fuel-based inputs. We built a system that converts natural gas into food through the Haber-Bosch process. But that means your farm is no longer an ecological system. It's a derivative of the global energy market. When natural gas prices spike because of a conflict halfway across the world, your nitrogen prices follow instantly. You are caught in a cost-price squeeze where you have zero leverage. You can't negotiate lower prices with a handful of multinational firms that control the world's seeds and chemicals. And you certainly can't pass those costs down to the massive grain elevators and food processors who buy your crops. They are the price setters, and you are the price taker. This puts you in a position where the cost of the next bag of fertilizer might actually exceed the projected value of the grain it will produce. We call this the liquidity wall. It's the point where you simply run out of cash to buy the final 20% of inputs required to keep your yield stable. And when you hit that wall, the debt yield spiral begins. High costs lead to lower income, which leads to higher interest debt to cover the next season, which leaves even fewer resources for. So why can't we just pivot? Why can't we just switch to organic or regenerative models tomorrow? Because the system is locked in. Your machinery, your debt structures, and your soil health have all been calibrated to this high-input model. If you stop today, the biological response is immediate and catastrophic. But staying the course means watching your equity slowly dissolve as you liquidate land just to pay for diesel. The old ways of traditional agronomy are officially dead. Survival now depends on a different kind of strategy, one that moves from who can grow the most to who can waste the least. But to understand how to fix the yield, we first have to understand the invisible debt you've been building in your soil for the last decade. A debt that is about to come due. To understand why your margins are disappearing, we have to look past the invoice and look at the physics of your farm. We have spent the last 50 years building what is essentially a fossil fuel engine made of soil. This is the thermodynamic lock-in. In a natural ecosystem, nutrients cycle. They move from the soil to the plant and back to the soil again. But the industrial model replaced those local cycles with a linear, high-input system. We stopped relying on the sun and started relying on natural gas. The bridge between the energy market and your dinner table is the Haber-Bosch process. This is the industrial method used to create nitrogen fertilizer, and it requires massive amounts of natural gas to fix nitrogen from the air. Because of this, the modern agri-food system is structurally engineered to require multiple calories of fossil fuel energy to produce just 1 calorie of food. This means your farm isn't just a business. It is a derivative of the energy market. When geopolitical conflicts spike the price of gas, your nitrogen costs don't just go up. They are mathematically forced. But the lock-in isn't just about energy. It is about the liquidity wall you hit every spring. You operate in a negative working capital cycle. This means you have to pay for 100% of your seeds, fuel, and fertilizer months, or even a year, before you see your first dollar of revenue. When prices double, that upfront cash requirement creates a hard ceiling. You simply cannot afford the last 20% of the inputs you need. This is where the real danger begins. Something we call soil nutrient mining. When you can't afford the fertilizer, your crops don't just stop growing. Instead, they start pulling the remaining minerals directly from your soil's organic matter. You are essentially borrowing from your future productivity to survive the current season. This creates a productivity debt that can take a decade of restorative work to repay, even if input prices drop tomorrow. You are caught in a pincer movement. On one side, you have concentrated institutional monopolies, a few multinational firms that control the patented genetics and the chemical recipes you are locked into. They have immense pricing power. On the other side, you have global commodity exchanges that set the price of your crop regardless of what it cost you to grow it. You have become a price taker on both ends of your own business. For the mid-sized farmer, the squeezed middle, this is a survival crisis. You have the high fixed costs of machinery debt, but you lack the massive scale that allows industrial giants to amortize these shocks. The giants might actually win in this scenario, consolidating land as smaller players hit that liquidity wall and are forced to liquidate. You are essentially running a race where the floor is rising faster than you can climb. This thermodynamic dependency has made the entire food supply chain brittle. It is a system built for efficiency during low-cost times, but it lacks the resilience for the world we live in now. The question is no longer, how do we get cheaper fertilizer? The question is, how do we decouple the farm from this energy trap without triggering a total yield collapse? To find that answer, we have to look at three specific pillars of adaptation. And the first one requires you to stop guessing and start measuring with surgical precision. If you stay on the path you are on, the biological cliff is inevitable because the old math of the Green Revolution has reached its limit. But there is a bridge across that cliff, and it requires a structural pivot from volume-based farming to efficiency-based resilience. This is the great pivot, and it is built on three distinct pillars: optimization, substitution, and financial engineering. Each pillar is designed to match your specific binding constraints, whether you are managing thousands of hectares or a small family plot. The first pillar is optimization, and it is the immediate answer for large-scale operations that need to amortize high fixed costs. It is about using precision agriculture to do more with less, utilizing AI, EOT, and GPS-enabled systems to apply inputs at a variable rate only where the plant actually needs them. Consider the impact of a technique called microdosing. Instead of broadcasting across an entire field, you apply fertilizer directly to the seed or root zone. This single shift can reduce your total input usage by 30 to 50% without causing a massive collapse in yield. For a mid-sized farmer, these small efficiency gains are the difference between insolvency and a profitable margin. The second pillar is substitution, and this is how you break your thermodynamic lock-in to the energy market. We have to move away from synthetic NPK and toward regenerative ecological models. This means integrating biostimulants, cover cropping, and nitrogen-fixing crops like soybeans or pulses into your rotation. These biological substitutes naturally decouple your farm from volatile global gas prices by restoring the soil's local nutrient cycles. You are essentially hiring microbes, like Azotobacter, to pull nitrogen from the air for free, rather than buying it from a factory in another hemisphere. However, the hardest part of this pivot is what we call the transition gap. Moving from a chemical-heavy model to a biological one usually takes 3 to 5 years, and during that time, your yields may temporarily dip as the soil biology resets. This is where the third pillar comes in: financial engineering. For most producers, the problem isn't agronomic knowledge, it's the liquidity wall. To bridge this gap, we need smart subsidies, moving away from blanket fuel discounts toward direct digital transfers linked to your actual soil testing data. We also need credit moratoriums to prevent the debt yield spiral from forcing you into a land sale before your biological transition is complete. Think of Elias, a farmer who saw his input costs triple in a single season. He didn't just cut his usage and wait for the crash. He used Pillar 3 to secure a credit moratorium, which gave him the liquidity to invest in Pillar 1's microdosing tech. By his third season, he was transitioning to Pillar 2, using cover crops to rebuild the organic carbon his soil had lost to decades of mining. He moved from being a victim of the global energy market to a steward of a resilient regional ecosystem. But even with these pillars in place, there is one final hurdle you must overcome: the predatory intermediaries who are waiting to capture your hard-earned scarcity premium. The predatory intermediaries who dominate the agri-food supply chain thrive on one thing: your isolation. We have to acknowledge the bottleneck: those few massive food processors and grain elevators that capture the scarcity premium while you carry the production risk. Bypassing these gatekeepers requires more than just a list of names. It requires a structural shift in how we aggregate our bargaining power. Scaling a farmer-producer organization isn't just about saving a few dollars on a bag of seed. It is about turning a divider into a connector for your entire region. When you utilize cooperative buying, you stop acting as a price taker and start dictating the terms of your survival. This rebalances the margin and gives you the leverage to bypass monopolistic suppliers who have held the pricing power over your farm for far too long. But we cannot fix a thermodynamic problem with bargaining power alone. We must address the liquidity wall through aggressive financial engineering. You need to advocate for a shift from blanket fuel subsidies toward a model of smart subsidies. These are direct digital transfers linked specifically to your soil testing data rather than political favoritism. This transparency ensures that aid reaches the squeezed middle during the most critical months of the season. Simultaneously, you must seek credit moratoriums that prevent a temporary yield dip from turning into a permanent land liquidation. Without these safety nets, the biological transition becomes a death spiral.